This HOA treasurer parked her $60,000 BMW in my garage without even asking, and then fined me $200 for leaving my garage door open overnight. I dragged myself home after a 12-hour electrical shift, work boots crunching on gravel, and there it is. Her pearl white luxury SUV sitting dead center where my tools belong. The smell of her leather seats mixing with motor oil, her alarm chirping like it owned the place. When I asked her to move, she waved a piece of paper at me, emergency parking authorization, and told me to learn community cooperation. 6 weeks later, I owned her house, and she was sobbing into my voicemail begging me not to foreclose, while the whole neighborhood watched. But before I reveal how her little power grab destroyed her financially, tell me, have you ever been steamrolled by some petty authority figure just because they could? Drop your location below. Let's see how many of us are done being pushed around. My name's Jake Morrison. 2 years ago, I thought buying my first house in Willowbrook Estates was hitting the jackpot. I'm 34, an electrician, single dad to 8-year-old Emma, who stays with me every other weekend. 6 years of saving every overtime penny, eating ramen like fine dining, all for a modest 3-bedroom with a 2-car garage I could finally call mine. That garage was my sanctuary, the smell of sawdust and copper wire. My grandfather's old workbench, the same one that built half our town. Space to build Emma's treehouse without some neighbor measuring my property lines. When Grandpa passed, he left me a small inheritance, just enough to fix the roof, repaint the siding, and turn that garage into a real workshop. Every evening, the garage door's mechanical rumble sealed me off from the world. My fortress of peace, Willowbrook, looked perfect. Middle-class homes built between 2015 and 2018. Young families, retirees, and an $180 monthly HOA fee that was supposed to keep everything simple. Keep your lawn neat. Don't paint your house neon. Mind your business. Easy. Then I met Brenda Whitfield and learned that simple was not in her vocabulary. 52, drives a $160,000 BMW like it's a weapon. Lives in a corner. McMansion with a circular driveway that screams, bow before me. HOA treasurer, which apparently means dictator of suburban perfection. Her husband Brad works in city planning, and she drops that fact like ammunition in every conversation. Always immaculate, designer everything, smile colder than polished steel. The type who measures your grass height while pretending to walk her tiny purse dog. My first Brenda encounter came 6 months after I moved in. I was installing safety lighting for elderly Mrs. Chen after a few break-ins. Suddenly I hear the sharp click of heels on concrete and smell enough perfume to knock a man down. "Excuse me," she says, clutching her clipboard like holy scripture. "I don't see any permits posted for this electrical work." I explain outdoor lighting doesn't need permits. Show my state license. Even offer to review safety codes. Her reply, "I'll need to verify that with my husband. We can't have questionable contractors, compromising property values." The way she said questionable, contractors, like my 12 years of experience, meant nothing because I drove a work truck instead of a German luxury car. That was my official welcome to Brenda's neighborhood. Over the next 18 months, she turned HOA enforcement into performance art. Dawn patrol with her violation notebook, documenting kids' bikes on driveways and trash cans, retrieved 11 minutes late. She made HOA rules her personal crusade against anyone who actually worked for a living. Mrs. Chen got cited for aesthetically inappropriate decorations, her late husband's memorial wind chimes. Tom Rodriguez was fined for parking his work truck in his own driveway. The sound of Brenda's heels became our neighborhood warning alarm. Kids scattered, blinds twitched, and everyone held their breath, hoping she'd just keep walking. Even Emma noticed. One day she asked, "Dad, why does the mean pretty lady always look like she smelled something yucky?" Out of the mouths of babes, I kept my head down, followed every rule to the inch. Grass trimmed to 2.75 inches. Work van parked on the street. But that Tuesday evening, everything changed. 12 hours on a job installing emergency backup power for a medical clinic. Lives literally depending on my wiring. By the time I pulled into my driveway at 7:30 p.m., my steel-toed boots felt like bricks. All I wanted was a beer and to check on Emma's treehouse. Instead, I found Brenda Whitfield's pearl-white BMW X5 parked dead center in my garage. Not partially blocking, dead center, maybe 6 inches clearance on each side. Doors lined up to scratch my workbench if they opened. The smell of her leather mixed with motor oil and sawdust. A clash of luxury and honest work that made my stomach turn. I stood there for 30 seconds, remote in hand, wondering if I was hallucinating from exhaustion. Then the car alarm chirped once, That smug little sound that meant she'd locked it inside my garage. The car alarm chirped once. That smug little sound that meant she'd locked it inside my garage. I stood there for a second, mouth open, trying to process the level of entitlement I was looking at. Then the motion light flicked on, and there she was, Brenda Whitfield, standing at the edge of my driveway with a latte in one hand and her phone in the other. "Jake," she said like we were old friends, "I hope you don't mind. Emergency HOA meeting tonight, limited parking. Temporary community override," I blinked. "Override? You parked in my garage." She smiled that corporate smile that never touched her eyes. "Well, we can't have residents leaving garage doors open all night. Safety issue. And technically," she said, lowering her voice like she was sharing some state secret, "common driveways fall under community jurisdiction." "Common driveways?" I repeated, stepping forward. "Lady, that's my house, my garage, my mortgage." She looked unbothered, sipping her drink. "I understand your frustration, Jake, but rules are rules. I'll move it tomorrow morning after our HOA business is complete." She walked away like she'd just done me a favor. That night, I slept about 3 hours. The next morning, I woke to a $200 fine notice taped to my door. Garage left open overnight. Safety violation. HOA code 8.4B. Signed, Treasurer Brenda Whitfield. I almost laughed. Then I realized her car was still there. Same spot, same smug reflection in the metal hood. By 9 how, I was standing in front of her manicured front yard, violation letter in hand. She answered in silk pajamas, sunglasses, and the same fake smile. "Brenda," I said, holding the paper up, "you fined me for a rule you broke. You left your car in my garage all night." Her tone turned syrupy sweet. "Oh, Jake, let's not get dramatic. You chose to leave the door open. I assumed you didn't mind community access. Community access. To my property." That's when I decided she'd just made the worst mistake of her life. That weekend, I started documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, video recordings, every interaction, every noise complaint, every fraudulent fine. Mrs. Chen whispered over the fence. She fined me for leaving a potted plant visible from the road. "You're not alone." Turns out half the neighborhood had stories. Tom Rodriguez showed me receipts. $200 in maintenance violation fees Brenda had processed through her own Venmo account. That's when it clicked. Brenda wasn't enforcing rules. She was profiting off them. Monday morning, I called the county clerk. No record of any official fines. HOAs were supposed to report fee structures annually. Ours hadn't been updated since before Brenda took over as treasurer. When I asked who handled audits, the clerk sighed. "That's the problem. Nobody does, unless someone files a formal complaint." Someone just did. I spent the next 2 weeks digging through public records. Brenda and her husband Brad had set up a shell LLC, Willowbrook Community Enforcement Services. Every fine, every payment, every maintenance charge had been funneled into that private account for personal use. Designer handbags, luxury vacations, even a Peloton subscription listed under community wellness equipment. I sent everything to the county attorney with a neat bow. 38 fraudulent transactions, 14 residents fined illegally, $30,400 missing from HOA funds. But I didn't stop there. I printed everything, bound it, and slid a copy into every single mailbox on the block. By sunset, Brenda's little suburban empire was burning faster than dry cedar. Neighbors crowded her lawn, voices raised. One man shouted, "You fined me for having a flagpole, Brenda. Where's that money now?" She tried to deny it, of course, but the documents spoke louder than her silk blouse. That night, her husband's car was gone by 9 p.m. And the next morning, a for sale sign was quietly hammered into their perfect lawn. The morning after her tantrum, I decided Brenda Whitfield had officially picked the wrong neighbor to mess with. No yelling, no arguments. I was done playing by her rules. From that moment, I was playing by mine. I spent 3 nights digging through public records, property titles, tax filings, anything with her name on it. Turns out, Brenda's McMansion wasn't even fully paid off. She'd taken a second mortgage against it to cover her husband's consulting business, which, by the way, hadn't filed taxes in 2 years. That's when I realized her arrogance wasn't built on wealth. It was built on debt. Her entire empire was a stack of unpaid invoices and HOA power trips. So, I did what any blue-collar guy with an electrical license and a lifetime of patience would do. I started flipping her world, one regulation at a time. First move, I read the entire 98-page HOA charter, every fine print, every clause, every forgotten paragraph. And I found the golden ticket. A rule stating any homeowner could run for treasurer if a special meeting was called by 30% of residents. All it took was a clipboard, a few good neighbors, and some righteous anger. Turns out, I wasn't the only one tired of Brenda's dictatorship. By the end of the week, I had 17 signatures. By week 2, I had 42. Even the retirees who'd never complained before were signing, whispering like spies. It's about time someone stopped her. Then Karma delivered a gift. While Brenda was busy fining people for their ugly mailboxes, her own property had a small but illegal electrical setup. Her fancy landscape lights were wired into community power lines, meaning she'd been stealing HOA electricity for over a year, about $200 worth. I didn't expose her right away. No, I let her confidence build. Let her walk around like a queen while I quietly gathered evidence. Receipts, photos, timestamps, everything neat, labelled and dated. Meanwhile, the neighbourhood started shifting. People waved at me more. Mrs. Chen brought homemade dumplings again. Tom parked his truck proudly in the driveway, daring Brenda to say a word. And Brenda, she could feel it. The whispers, the side glances, the silence when she passed. She started doubling down. More fines, more patrols, more desperate attempts to reassert control. I knew what was coming, her breaking point, and I was ready for it. 2 weeks later, during an HOA board meeting packed with homeowners, Brenda announced a new community policy banning unapproved tradesmen from working on properties. Translation? She was targeting me, but I smiled, leaned forward and said, "Actually, Brenda, you might want to read Section 4, Clause 17. The one that says, no policy can restrict a licensed state contractor performing approved residential work." Her face dropped. A few people chuckled. And I knew right then, I had her cornered. After the meeting, I dropped my little bombshell, quietly, politely, to a few neighbours. "Hey, did you guys know Brenda's been pulling power from HOA lines for her landscaping?" By the next morning, the rumour was wildfire. Brenda's front yard was lit up like a Christmas tree. And not in a good way. She tried to shut it down, of course. Called it a misunderstanding. But by then, the damage was done. I filed an official HOA complaint. Using her own forms, mind you, citing unauthorized power usage and property misrepresentation. Exactly the same legal language she used against everyone else. Within a week, the HOA president called an emergency board meeting. Brenda's name was all over the agenda, and I made sure every resident in Willowbrook Estates was invited. It wasn't just revenge anymore, it was accountability. When she walked in that night, clipboard in hand, expecting to lead the meeting, the president stopped her mid-step. "Brenda, please take a seat. You're under review." You could have heard a pin drop. Her smile froze. The first time I'd ever seen fear behind that flawless foundation. They read every accusation: misuse of funds, unauthorized power use, harassment of residents. Every word landed like a hammer. When they asked for evidence, I handed over a neatly organized folder. Printed, tabbed, time-stamped. Her signature was on half the violations she'd filed, and her illegal power connection on the other half. She tried to argue, voice trembling. "This is a mistake. I didn't know." But the president cut her off. "Brenda, you wrote the rule book. You should know better." By the end of that night, the vote was unanimous. Brenda Whitfield, suspended indefinitely from her HOA position. As she stormed out, heels clacking like gunshots, the neighborhood exhaled. For the first time in years, people smiled without checking their lawns first. But for me, it wasn't over. Because buried in those records, I'd found something else. Something bigger. Turns out Brenda had borrowed HOA funds for emergency maintenance that never happened. Over $9,000 had simply disappeared. And guess whose name was still on the HOA bank account? That's right, mine. Because after her suspension, the board voted me interim treasurer until elections. The same garage she once invaded had now become the war room where I dismantled her empire. One spreadsheet at a time, I wasn't just fixing lights anymore. I was shining them on every dark corner she thought she could hide. When the board voted me interim treasurer, I didn't picture myself sitting behind a laptop balancing spreadsheets. I pictured more sweat, less paperwork. Turns out justice often shows up in Excel cells and bank statements. The first thing I did was freeze everything. As interim treasurer, I had the authority to place temporary holds on outgoing disbursements until a proper audit could be completed. That meant no more late-night Venmo transfers labeled Community Refresh that magically went into a woman's private account. Next, I called our small-town CPA, Maria, who smelled like strong coffee and knew numbers like saints know scripture. She came over, sat at my kitchen table where my workbench met my laptop, and we went to work. "Follow the money," she said, and I did. We traced hundreds of transactions. A lawn revitalization check cashed at a boutique landscaping firm. Turned out the firm was just a shell. The deposit forwarded, in pieces, to a personal account. A so-called emergency tree removal that never happened. Receipts forged. Checks deposited on a Sunday into an account registered under a DBA that matched Brenda's maiden name. It wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern. Months of siphoned HOA dues and phantom invoices. Every time Brenda fined somebody, part of that money circled back to her. Maria looked at me and said, "You have a civil case that writes itself." We took it to the county attorney. I expected bureaucracy and polite dismissals. Instead, a woman in a navy suit named Carolyn leaned forward over the folder and said, "We can put a lien on the property for restitution and initiate civil proceedings. If we get a judgment and she doesn't pay, it becomes executable against assets, including the house." My chest tightened. The house, a corner lot with a circular driveway and that damn BMW, had always looked untouchable, but it sat on loans, and loans have claws. We filed the suit that week. The complaint was clean, professional. Embezzlement of HOA funds, breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment. I sat through depositions, produced account statements, and listened as Brenda's lawyer tried to carve out sympathetic angles. A stressed mother, financial hardship, a lapse in judgment. The neighbours watched, some by me, some from their own porches, and a few in the front row of the county hearing, eyes like slow suns burning through everything. Court moves slower than I expected. Paperwork, motions, extensions. Brenda stammered and dressed the accusations in tears and excuses, but the evidence kept arriving like iron at a forge, solid, hot, undeniable. Then, one bright Tuesday morning, we got the judgment. The judge read the numbers aloud, plain and boring as an accountant's hymn. Restitution, interest, court costs. The total was a number that made a grown woman's voice thin with panic. "She has 30 days to pay," Carolyn told me later, closing the folder. "If she doesn't, we record a judgment lien with the county recorder's office." She didn't. 30 days became 40. Banks aren't patient when legal claims attach themselves to collateral. The lien was recorded, public, visible, a red flag other lenders can't pretend not to see. People who think power is permanent learn a painful lesson when paper becomes public. Suddenly the polite invitations stopped. The neighbours who'd once smiled for Brenda's coffee table conversations avoided eye contact. Her Peloton memberships, weekend trips, and boutique purchases were suddenly liabilities on a spreadsheet someone else could access. I'll be honest, I didn't revel in her fear. I revelled in the rightness of it. There's a difference. When Brenda missed the deadline to cure the debt, the county clerk sent a notice. The HOA, as an aggrieved party, could seek foreclosure on the judgment lien. I'll spare the boring legal forms. Suffice to say, we moved forward. The HOA board voted, the county scheduled a sheriff's sale, and a date was set. I remember how surreal it felt walking into that meeting room the day the board approved foreclosure. People shuffled in with folding chairs and felt strangely like witnesses at a slow execution. On the wall, a map of the neighbourhood looked like a game board people had been playing at my expense. We voted in the open. The motion carried. I signed the paperwork. It was procedural, almost antiseptic. That afternoon, the sheriff's office posted the notice on Brenda's door and recorded the sale. Word travelled fast. That weekend, the cul-de-sac was full of neighbours, whispering and pointing. 2 weeks later, the sheriff's sale came like a cold public sunrise. A dozen people lined the county steps. I brought a folding chair and a stack of copies of the audit. Not because I wanted to flaunt them, but because I wanted the truth to be obvious and available. Brenda arrived in a suit that didn't fit her like it used to. Her posture was smaller. Her face had that expression of someone who'd been living on borrowed certainty and finally ran out of credit. She stood in the crowd and watched as the auctioneer read the rules. The bidding started low. The house's market value was pretty, but the lien was heavier than most people thought. I had no interest in profit. I had an interest in justice, and in making sure the property wouldn't disappear into somebody else's shell company. I bid at the minimum required to prevail, not to make money, but to make a point. My heart hammered in my chest as the gavel came down. When that hammer hit wood, ownership transferred in a way more final than any HOA notice ever could. After the sale, people drifted forward, but I wasn't ready to talk. I paid the clerk, signed the papers, and felt the old tool shed of my life shift slightly, like a new notch in a worn belt. The house above the garage lights was mine, legally, cleanly, and by the slow grind of the law. That night I recorded a voicemail I knew would find its way to Brenda. I kept it short. Hi Brenda, it's Jake. I thought you should hear it from me first. The house has been sold at sheriff's sale. This is what happens when you steal from your neighbors. I hope whatever comes next helps you understand the damage. The next morning, her voice filled my inbox, thin, pleading, begging me not to take the house, promising to set up a payment plan, to return the money. I listened and felt something like pity and something like closure. I didn't reply. The neighborhood reaction was mixed. For some, the moment was catharsis. For others, it was awkward. Houses are communities, and communities are messy. There were whispered arguments about whether foreclosure was mercy or cruelty. Some old-timers said I should have handed the evidence to authorities and let them jail her. Others said I'd done precisely what the system allows a community to do when people exploit it. What I did was practical. I wasn't interested in humiliation. I was interested in stopping the conduct and restoring the money to the HOA coffers. The sheriff's sale paid back a significant portion of what was missing. The rest was reclaimed through small claim suits and coordinated reimbursements. With ownership came responsibility. I didn't move into Brenda's house and put up a welcome mat. I put an ad on the HOA bulletin, home available for temporary purchase by community or affordable housing partner. Interested parties contact the treasurer. I could have sold it for a profit, but what would that have proven? Instead, we used the asset to stabilize the HOA budget, refund wrongly collected fines, and create a small emergency fund, the very thing Brenda had claimed to protect by fining people. There was fallout. Brenda moved out within weeks. She left behind boxes and a trail of unpaid charges. Her name was the talk of the street, and in a private way, that felt necessary. People needed to see consequence. Sometimes I get asked if I'd do it again, if I'd walk the legal path, dig into ledgers, file liens, then stand in a county parking lot and bid on a house. The answer is complicated. There's a clean satisfaction in seeing justice done by the book. But there's also the human cost, the shame, the upheaval, the family that might have been collateral in a case of greed. In the end, owning the house never felt like owning victory. It felt like reclaiming what my neighborhood had a right to: honesty, fairness, and the free space to live without being extorted for overdue trash cans. That night, as moonlight pooled across the pavement, I walked by the garage where Brenda's BMW had once sat. The space felt different. No perfume, no luxury leather, just the faint smell of motor oil and wood shavings. I locked up my tools, took a deep breath, and realized something important. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's paperwork and patience. Sometimes it's standing in a room signing forms while other people tell you you've gone too far. And sometimes, the quietest people with the most ordinary lives are the ones who end up restoring the balance. The neighborhood looks the same on the outside. Same trimmed hedges. Same white mailboxes standing like little soldiers. But something in the air feels different, lighter, like the tension that used to hang over us every time Brenda's heels clicked across the pavement finally evaporated. The HOA meetings are quiet now. No more shouting over fines or fake agendas. We meet in my garage sometimes, the same one she once invaded. Just neighbors sitting in folding chairs, coffee thermoses in hand, laughing about things that actually matter, like whose kid's science project caught fire, or how we're finally using HOA dues to plant community gardens instead of ornamental, landscaping upgrades. Funny how justice sometimes rebuilds. Things you didn't know were broken. The audit money we recovered went right back into the community. Mrs. Chen got her memorial, wind chimes reinstalled, this time with a small bronze plaque at the base that reads, "In memory of those who worked quietly, but made the loudest difference." Tom Rodriguez parks his work truck in his own driveway now. No one complains. The HOA board even amended the bylaws to allow working vehicles as long as they're clean and safe. It's almost poetic. The same truck she fined him for is now written into the new policy manual as a symbol of fairness. Sometimes I walk past Brenda's old house. It's rented now. A young couple with 2 kids moved in. You can hear laughter from their backyard instead of tension. The porch light glows warm, not sterile white. They wave when they see me. They don't even know the full story. Just that their home came from some old HOA mess. Maybe that's for the best. As for Brenda, I hear she moved 2 counties over. Her husband filed for divorce. Last I saw, she'd opened a small consulting firm. I don't hate her. If anything, I hope she learned what power really means. Not control, not intimidation, but responsibility. That's something people like her rarely understand until they lose it. Emma and I still work in the garage. The smell of sawdust, the hum of the radio, her little sneakers tapping the floor while she paints. One day she looked up and asked, "Dad, is the mean lady gone forever?" And I said, "She's gone, sweetheart, but we don't need to hate her. We just make things better now." That's the lesson I want her to keep, that revenge doesn't have to be loud or cruel. Sometimes the best revenge is rebuilding what someone tried to ruin, making something good where there used to be rot. Last month, we hosted the first ever Willowbrook Community BBQ. Free food, music, kids running through sprinklers. No fines, no citations, no ridiculous HOA notices, just people finally acting like neighbors again. It felt like something Sarah, my late wife, would have smiled at. She always believed that communities are built in backyards, not boardrooms. As the sun set that evening, I sat on my porch, a cold drink in hand, watching fireflies blink across the yard. I thought about how close I'd come to losing faith in people. In fairness, in the idea that the system could still work if you stayed patient and did things right. Then I looked over at the treehouse. Emma and I finished last fall, built with wood. From the old workbench and railings from reclaimed lumber I saved for years. It stood strong and simple, like proof that even after fire and fraud and endless meetings, you can still build something that lasts. I guess that's what justice really is. Not punishment, restoration, getting back what was taken and making it stronger. So, yeah, Brenda burned herself down trying to play queen of the cul-de-sac. And me? I just kept wiring things, fixing things, and planting seeds in places nobody thought could grow. Because that's the thing about people like us. The ones who work with their hands, who get underestimated. We don't just survive chaos, we rebuild from it. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we build something even better.